you are live.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order for Public Safety Working Group Committee. We do have minutes to approve from our last meeting on September 23rd. Hoping the committee members will approve those minutes, please. Can I get a motion for that?
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. So we're going to go right into this. We do have a few guests with us, a professor from University of Akron and some interns. I'm going to try to ask the committee members to stick to the agenda that's in front of us. And then obviously if we have additional topics, we can maybe ask the representatives from the police department to hopefully research and present those future topics for our future meetings. Our next meeting will be the week of October 19th. So with that, moving forward, we're going to have Captain Yohe go first because Lieutenant Ferrer went first last time. So Captain Yohe is going to address two things tonight. One, we had a real nice letter that was written to us and read it. And I think Sarah, our Deputy Clerk of City Council, will read that in again. Captain Yohe is going to speak in regards to that. And then he's going to also speak in regards to how the Akron Police Department uses our less lethal agents. Actually on Monday, we passed legislation to replenish our stockpile with the Akron Police Department. So that's how we're going to start it off. So what I'll do is if you're okay, Sarah, you can read in that letter, and then Captain Yohe will go first, and then I'll have the lieutenant go.
Sure. This is from Deborah Lamb. She says, hello, I was referred by Councilman Malik to write to you regarding the technology working group responsible for discussing and identifying the military style equipment thought to be used by the Akron Police Department. I am inquiring as to what specific military style equipment might the committee be referring to. It would be a good idea to have a detailed and specific itemized list of what you deem military style. I am simply a citizen with a vested interest in the safety of our police officers and of course the citizens of Akron. In looking at the tumult that is taking place in other police departments around the country, it is clear that officials jumped to conclusions, took actions, and made declarations that affected the safety of their constituents and eroded the morale of the police department to seemingly irreparable levels. The increased crime rate and the ad hoc depolicing that is taking place in other cities is due in part to lack of support from city officials and a complete and utter misreading of the needs of the public. I'm concerned that we may be creating a problem where there is none. I am happy to discuss this further and would like to be involved in these discussions. Sincerely, Deborah Layton.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So Captain Yohe, I know we presented that letter to you about 2 weeks ago, and hopefully you have some good information for us and the person that wrote that letter.
Sure. Well, thank you, Donnie. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is to thank Mrs. Lamb. Many of her comments and concerns were, I guess, spot on and appreciated. And I appreciated an opportunity to address those things with her. I guess before we begin, I would like to kind of start off by asking council members themselves if there's any specific areas or things in their own minds that maybe would help me further define and kind of categorize these things. There's certainly generic definitions of I guess, military equipment, but I can perhaps better answer those things if I would have some perspective from you. So if any of you would like to kind of define or help me kind of answer that initially, it could perhaps improve my response. So do any of you have any questions or comments about what you think military equipment is, or to address for Mrs. Lamb? No? Okay. Well, then I guess I could kind of jump in. I mean, certainly there's, thoughts about the militarization of police and that what that means, as far as our adoption of certain structures or patterning after a military or the organizational style of the military. I guess it's no secret that police departments like the Akron Police Department do have a paramilitary structure and use some of the equipment that is used by soldiers. But certainly this topic can't be I guess, adequately understood or overly simplified with a blanket definition without a little further explanation. So I do appreciate the opportunity to kind of define that. As part of our mission, in the police department, we've obviously been charged with handling critical incidents, and many of those incidents do involve protecting society from individuals who are violent or armed, and certainly such things as the command structure from the military, like the use of rank or incident command systems, and some of the tactics do provide an effective and useful approach to handling some of those things. However, there are pretty substantial differences really between police and military, really to make it kind of an inaccurate and unfair, I guess, in applying the similarities in such a broad brush is to kind of overpaint those things with negative connotations and implications. So pretty broad definitions. And again, I'll try to get to the meat and potatoes of this as far as the questions of equipment. The military uses weapons, and of course, police officers use weapons. But there are vast differences, I guess, between the two. First, soldiers typically carry long guns as their primary weapon, and police officers carry pistols as their primary weapon. The military uses protective armor. Usually that's with very high levels of ballistic protection, all the way from their body armor all the way up to armored vehicles and tanks. The police department obviously does have body armor, a lighter type body armor. No helmets are used, and we don't have tanks. We do have access to rifles and shotguns and cruisers, and they're not usually carried by police officers or displayed until the need is brought up to us, right? Facing the threats that we've seen, especially as of late, from society. And of course, when justified, we have things like the SWAT team or the mobile field force team, who have specially selected and trained officers that are equipped with different weapons and increased levels of armor and protection. But again, the two things between the police and the military are quite a bit different in our approaches. So to answer your question specifically for Mrs. Lamb, the police department really doesn't have any military equipment. The closest thing we would have is some basically on loan rifles from a program called the LASO 1033 program, where the military will have some equipment that they can loan out to departments who maybe due to budget limitations have been unable to purchase their own. Those weapons we do have. Some of the officers are issued those weapons and trained with those weapons, but again, they're used when the need is met. It's not something they carry regularly on calls. They may have them in their cruisers and accessible, but that's really the only military equipment that we have. We do, I guess, use things that are used by police or military, like chemical munitions, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, and things like flash and noise devices, the distraction devices, we call them flash bangs. But in a generic sense, the police department really doesn't have any other military equipment. I would like to have some. I would like to have not military equipment. I would like to have some equipment that they use, like armored vehicles, and they make police or vehicles, armored vehicles that are specifically designed for use by police departments. It is something that we have a very big need for. In fact, within the last year, we've had to ask to borrow or to have other agencies in the area bring theirs to our city to address some of the threats that our SWAT team and police officers have had to address here in the city. So there is a need for equipment like that. But again, I just want to kind of address some of the negative connotations and perspectives that, in my opinion, are somewhat short-sighted in their approach to looking at these as something that they're not. So, in summary, the police department, aside from those borrowed rifles from the DRMO program, are the only military equipment that we have. We have weapons, we have body armor. Our SWAT team, certainly, when called upon by the need, does have, long guns and other weapons, but those things are for police-related functions. And I guess we can explain more into that, and I certainly would appreciate and do everything I can to explain further, about that. I know there might be some questions. I would love to answer those directly and, again, more specifically. So before we move into the area about the chemical munitions, can I answer any questions about that from anyone? I know that when this had come out, and why I appreciated Ms. Lamb's comments is, I guess we have to define or think of what city council or others might be thinking about when they mention this. I'm just trying to answer this in a generic response to what I might have assumed or thought someone might be referring to. So are there any other questions or anyone have any comments?
Thank you, Captain. Let's see, does any committee members have any questions or comments in regards to Captain Yohe?
I do. I just want to thank you for your clarification and the letter from Mrs. Lamb. I think one of the things, at least for me, is I didn't come in expecting you guys to have tons of military equipment, but we hear those terms thrown around so much on the national media and from other places and other sources. And this Reimagining committee is a nice way to kind of ferret that thing out and clarify that for not only us, but for the average citizen. Military style equipment, sure, people may need it. And as long as you have access to it, if you need it from other departments or other groups, I think that's a great thing. But I really welcome the opportunity to clarify those things, because like I said, we hear that thrown around so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good comments. Anybody else before we move on? I don't see, I'm looking at the hand raising thing. Nope. Okay. All right, Captain, go ahead and move on if you don't mind in regards to, obviously, City Council passed legislation Monday for the less lethal agents, and hopefully you can explain some of that and touch more on it with Captain Mokosi. That was at our meeting Monday.
Yeah, sure. I can explain a little bit. So the use of less lethal is a broad topic that includes equipment and devices that are used broadly by the police departments. We've talked about tasers, obviously, as a less lethal tool, some type of piece of equipment that can help either disperse or take individuals into custody who are breaking the law or presenting threats of violence to the community. So specifically addressing chemical munitions as one of those less lethal tools, we use these pieces of equipment in a couple fashions. Usually it's to move people from one location to another, right? The CS gas that we use is a safe but effective way to do that very thing. And on the SWAT team, we would use those chemical munitions as an example when we have individuals who we need to arrest or to mitigate the risk that they're presenting to themselves or the community by threats of violence, by using those munitions to force them out, for example, of a structure. Perhaps they've barricaded themselves in that house, for example, and it's not safe for the officers to go in and effect an arrest on them because they're armed and because they're, like I said, inside their own house, and the chemical munitions could force them out into an area that we could more safely and effectively take them into custody. When we would use those in a mobile field force setting, those would be during periods of riotous situations. As of late, the city had faced several dozen, over 40 probable demonstrations and protests. And on one of those incidents, we did have to deploy chemical munitions because the group became violent and riotous and started damaging property, throwing rocks at officers. And even though, many attempts were made to have discussions and talks, when assemblies rise to a state that the law is being broken, and certainly, we're not talking about there was a disruption of traffic services or the painting of roadways or those things in themselves are violations. But we're talking about when it rises to the destruction and the threatening, and like I said, having officers hit by rocks and bottles, then obviously that becomes an unlawful assembly. And when that happens, mobile field force commanders and others advise the parties that they're to leave the area and tell them where to go. And if they refuse to do that, then they would use chemical munitions to force them from those area and allow them again to safely effect the arrest of those committing violations of the law at that time. So those are a couple generic applications and uses of chemical munitions. Again, these are less lethal. They're not meant to kill or cause serious injury, really just meant to cause discomfort and to cause individuals to move from a certain location, whether it be a structure or a house or an area in which they're rioting or breaking the law. So again, generic responses, but I could certainly ask further questions about those. I know the recent order was because we'd faced several situations on SWAT where we used the inventory that we do had, and we faced a large group that was rioting and damaging property that we had to use munitions for that too. So the inventory we did have was used, and we had to replace that in preparation should those things occur in the future. So that's where that order had came from that you referred to. So.
All right. Thanks, Captain. Committee members,
Yeah.
Any comments or questions for Captain in regards to that topic?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. Thanks, Captain, for that explanation. I want to speak on behalf of an email that a resident from my ward, Mr. Tom Rizzo, sent out. And he expressed concern about the use of some of the chemicals that were in the legislation that council passed. And so this is more so as we look at how we reimagine, we're calling this public safety, but I like to call it reimagining how we govern. When you look at the city's organizational chart, at the top of the organizational chart are the citizens, the voters. Under that comes the administration, council, and the judicial system and everything underneath that. So to his point, I just want to express his concern because I apologize to him. He had some concern that we didn't take more time to have discussion on the legislation that we just passed because he had concern about some of the, he mentioned tear gas or chemicals that were in the legislation that we passed. So one of the things, and what got us to this point where, the citizens protesting about national things, but there's some local concerns too, about just having a voice in their government. By the time it gets to a riot or a mass demonstration, it's because people feel that they're not being heard by their local officials. We as council and as administration have to take responsibility for that. It pours out on the different city services, whichever one they may not be happy with. But from his email, I would just like in the future, especially now with this COVID-19, where people don't have access to their government, they can't come down during public comment. I think this is more so directed towards us as council. We need to make sure that we give an opportunity for citizens for something like this, when we're talking about an incident that has high citizen concern, that we give them more opportunity to speak before we act on emergency on everything. We give it the 3 readings so that citizens can share their concerns, so that, like Captain, like you did just now, you took time to explain about the different definitions of militarizing, police equipment. So that's just what I'd like to share here. He, in my opinion, he wrote a very informative email that expressed his concerns. I could forward it to you so you can help me better address his concerns.
Certainly,
But,
absolutely.
yeah, so that's more so on us as a governance standpoint, not rushing things through, especially now when we're doing everything by Zoom. Whenever we can, we have to take the 3 readings so that citizens have a chance to really give their input. So Thank you, but I will forward you the email.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yes, sir.
Any other members? All right. I know we have another council member on. All right, moving on. I think that's it for now for you, Captain Yohe. We'll move on to Lieutenant. I know he's going to continue the discussion of drones. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant.
Councilman, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh,
I'm not sure
yep.
if you can see everybody on your screen, but Councilman Malik had his hand raised.
Oh, okay. Well, I was looking to see if he did his little thing on screen, but yeah, go ahead, Councilman. I'm sorry.
Are you sure? I didn't want to
Sure.
interrupt since I'm not a member of the working group, but if it's okay.
Yeah, come on, please.
Thank you.
Join us.
And thank you, Captain Yohe. I really appreciate that explanation. You know, was out there during a lot of the demonstrations, and I did see a lot of restraint that was used. And so, you know, I really do appreciate that. I was also, I went out that night when I saw that the tear gas was used and saw that too. I guess two questions that I had. Can you talk about the difference between the situations in which tear gas is used and pepper spray is used? And then also, I know that I've read in some places that they talk about, you know, when the decision is made to use either of those agents, that and sometimes the policies require that a supervisor make that decision in the field. Do you think something like that is prudent? Because in my mind, especially when you're talking about a civil demonstration, you know, there are dozens of officers. There's certainly supervisors that are, you know, immediately available and would be able to make that decision. But I mean, I was looking at the policy. You know, I think the policy is pretty detailed. But do you think something like that makes any sense? So those are two questions. Thank you.
Okay. Well, the first question about the difference between the pepper spray versus the tear gas. Yes, there's a difference, two different chemicals. They can be used interchangeably. I guess the difference would be in the delivery system. So to explain further, officers on the street would carry pepper spray. It's called OC, and these are abbreviations for the chemical compounds found within them. Similar effects, they're, lacrimators. They make people's eyes water and tear, and they're irritating to mucous membranes. Both of them are. They're just two different chemical substances that are used. So officers on their duty belts carry pepper spray, and the officers individually have the authority based upon the circumstances they're facing, governed under our use of force policy, to deploy that in situations to further the arrest of an individual, take an individual into custody, or to stop acts of violence. So it's a tool like other tools on their duty belt based on the circumstances to use that as a tool. Now, when we talk about mass demonstrations or the use of those chemical agents on a riotous crowd, then certainly our policy, as you've read, would have the mobile field force commander, that supervisor, make the decision to deploy that. So that's not to say that unique situations can't come up. There's no absolutes. And what I mean by that is there could be potentially an officer serving in that mobile field force to become under assault. Someone could come up and attack him. And at that point, he could use his pepper spray to defend himself, right? You have to define this a little bit more. If the mobile field force in its entirety dealing with a riotous crowd, the decision to deploy chemical munitions to disperse that crowd certainly would fall upon that commander or supervisor at the time to do that. Okay. So two different little things there as we define this. The chemicals between OC and pepper spray are two different chemicals with a similar effect on people, right? As an irritant to them, used to disperse them or to take those people into custody or to stop their acts of violence. That's the purpose. Two different chemicals with the same purpose, carried differently. Patrolmen commonly carry the pepper spray, the OC, on their belt, but CS and OC can be utilized in what we would in the mobile field force and deployed through different other type of platforms. Beyond just like a pepper spray people would commonly think of a personally held can. These would be munitions that could be fired out of a launcher or a launching system, or from like a grenade basically that releases that product when the pin's pulled on that device and it's deployed. So am I answering your questions, Councilman? I mean,
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think, it's helpful to know that in, the preference is that a supervisor would make that decision. And I know, that's the inclination. I also understand that there could be situations in which, the context dependent, if there's, a threat to life or there's something like that where, the immediate decision could be made by a patrol officer. But, I do think that, I appreciate the additional context you provided.
yeah, just to reassure you, if I have one more moment too, just like any application of force, it's going to be done judiciously and with thought and a purposefulness, right? From the officer level all the way up to the command level. And I think we've shown that, right? In the recent months when we've had, like I said, dozens of large gatherings of individuals. And, when we deployed gas one time, when we spoke at length, people from city officials all the way through the different rank and file within the police department, really being there to support people's rights to speak and have a voice in the community. We've done that historically throughout my whole career, uh, and support free speech and folks having that voice. But when just like the one time when it did occur, when laws were getting violated at various levels and things started to escalate, and when city and private properties started to become damaged, and then of course when officers start getting hurt and attacked, it's reasonable, and I guess I hope it would be expected that we would disperse those crowds and use tools like less lethal munitions such as this to disperse those crowds and take those individuals committing those acts into custody. And so hopefully that explanation again explains and imparts a level of understanding of how we think and how we deploy, and all those things were done within the policy guidelines that I'm sure you've read and referred to a moment ago. So
No, I appreciate
thank you
that.
for those comments. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Captain.
Sure.
And Councilman, that was good questions. All right, Lieutenant.
Hey, Donnie, can I ask for a screen share or can I just do it on my own?
Oh, I don't know how to do that on
Yeah.
my end.
I can do it. Just 1 second and I'll.
It says the host has to let me do it.
Yep. They should let you know.
So, we're going to talk about drones. Drone is also, the technical term is a UAV or an unmanned aerial vehicle. I might use the term UAS, which is an unmanned aircraft system, which includes the drone, the operator, the pilot, and the whole system. So drone, UAV, and UAS, you'll hear in the next few minutes. So I can, you guys understand that that's kind of one and the same. But let me see if I can find my screen here. So if we take a look, because like a lot of people I think most people do know what like drones are, but I want you to realize that this isn't some intimidating large quadcopter that has a payload and is able to drop things on people or is weaponized in any fashion. These things are small. I mean, they're really cool pieces of technology. So here's a little video I want to share if I can. So that drone that you saw right there, I mean, it was so small, it's under 250 grams. I mean, you don't technically even have to register that with the FAA, although all aircraft in flight is regulated under the FAA. That drone is so small, technically doesn't even need to be registered. So a lot of people think of drones, they think of these intimidating large weapons that can fly for hours, that may be able to drop some type of payload or have some weapon system on them. This is not what police departments are interested in. This is military equipment. What the police department is interested in is simply a drone that has a camera. The drone without a camera is no good to the police department. It's that camera that we want. So the drone is essentially an extension of a tripod. Okay, we want to get aerial shots for photos so we can see. So a UAV program in Akron is in the works and will be implemented sometime in 2021. You will hear more about this program, especially with City Council, closer to the time that we go for implementation. And as the implementation program progresses through its phases. Tonight, I will kind of give you just a brief outline of where we're at with this program and how a UAV will be used specifically by the Akron Police Department once implemented. A UAS or a UAV is a very regulated technology platform that's regulated by the FAA and requires a pilot to be certified and tested. It would require the department to have a COA, which is a certificate of authorization, and the pilot to also have a Part 107. And the police department also needs to have a procedure in place to regulate the safe usage of these drones. All right, so this is not going to be done without significant amounts of training and certifications. All right, this isn't something that you just implement in a 6-month period of time. We've been working on implementing a UAV unit for probably 2 years now. So it takes quite a bit of time, and you can imagine how quickly that technology changes in that time while we are trying to get the drone program in flight here. So an APD UAV program will require a minimum of 3 people to operate it. One would have to be the pilot. The second is an observer who just basically watches to make sure there's no aircraft or objects, building, trees that the pilot may or may not see. And the third person on the ground would be like a security officer for the team. So at minimum, you would need 3 people plus the drone and the controller to have an unmanned aircraft systems unit. So the pilot, his primary function is for the safe flying of the drone. The observer's primary function is to watch the drone and the surrounding flight areas for objects and manned aviation, if in fact that becomes an issue. And the last security officer is responsible to protect the pilot and the observer from onlookers or interruptions while the drone is in flight. Because as soon as you start putting one of these things in the air, people get curious, they come around and they want to ask you questions. Well, the last thing you want to do is take your eyes off the drone while you're flying it to answer a question for someone who may be just, completely harmless and interested in what you're doing. So that's where that 3-man or 3-person team would come in. A drone can be very dangerous if there was ever a loss of connectivity from the pilot to the UAV, or if in fact the drone even crashed. So APD would take some precautions to ensure that this doesn't happen, and to ensure that something like this wouldn't happen. The APD UAS unit would be well trained and certified and approved through the FAA. The FAA regulates all airspace, including drones, over 250 grams. Safety is absolutely the #1 priority of the Akron Police Department UAS team, and we would only approve and authorize flight if the weather conditions and scene were appropriate to safely fly the drone. An APD UAV originally will only be approved for 2 cases during this initial inception of the program. The first, we would kind of use this UAS program to be extended in the future, but we really kind of treat this as a crawl, walk, run type of a thing. As drone technology continues to improve and become safer and these things become easier to fly, the UAV program may be expanded to other law enforcement platforms in the future. However, originally the UAV will be used for crime scene mapping and crash accident reconstruction investigations only. APD's UAV, the one that they purchase when we eventually will purchase this, will have built-in software in the drone that would allow the drone to fly autonomously while the UAV takes multiple points of measurements from the air using software provided to recreate a 3D map of the scene, whether it be a crash scene or whether it be a crime scene. All right. We also would use this drone in conjunction with the Faro scanner that we use for 3D mapping that we currently have in the crime scene unit on the ground. So eventually we will not only have a crime scene 3D map from the ground, we will also have a crime scene or an accident scene 3D map from the air. The crime scene unit will run the APD's UAV unit, and several detectives have already taken courses through OPATA for training purposes. Several of the detectives currently work in the crime scene unit, and they will have their UAV pilot's license by the FAA before the year's end, and they should be able to start safely and legally practicing flying the UAV by early 2021. The Akron Police Department has received a $25,000 donation from Emerald Chemical to purchase a UAV and get the appropriate certifications through the FAA for the program. The APD is looking, the Akron Police Department is looking to purchase nearly a $4,000 drone from DJI after the pilots receive their certifications. The donation from Emerald Chemical covers the initial cost of implementing this new program. What the APD's UAV will not be originally used for. The drone will not be used originally for search and rescue, surveillance, and crowd control or crowd monitoring. These use cases will be used perhaps at a later date when they become safer and easier to fly. That's about all I have. Do you guys have some questions more specific to what I just got done telling?
Councilman Rossnell, I know he will.
Sure. I mean, Lieutenant, I appreciate the information. You know, the thing for us is, as council members, that's interesting is because this is new technology, there's no legislation is behind. I remember some time ago when there was a problem because somebody was flying one over a football game. Just watching a football game, and everybody freaked out. But there was no, as you mentioned, there are some things that were with the FAA, but you know, nobody considers this at that time an aircraft, but you know, we have to catch up. So one thing is, we definitely need to stay in communication so we can see what best practice legislation is being created on the federal, state level, and in other cities and communities, so that we can adapt. But at the same time, I think this is an opportunity to again reimagine how to form a community police partnership. I know that in the real estate industry, more and more surveyors are using this kind of technology. Of course, farmers are using this kind of technology. And in cases where there's like, I see where this could help out in a lot of different areas. What I'd like to know is, are you hearing where they're looking at, in a sense, partnering with other professions that may use this technology so that if something happens in the area, you would know who's licensed with this type of equipment? Let's say a missing child, something like that out in the wooded areas, where they could lift their things and work with the police department. That I would just like to see where new technology, we try to find new ways of in collaboration with the community. I'm not talking about the novice. I'm talking about people who are trained professions and they use this equipment in their professions, and you may know who they are so that if something happens, you could ask them to lift up. That was my thought process.
Yes. So there's other departments around this area that have drones. I know the State Highway Patrol has a drone, and I believe that we've called on them in the past. I know Cuyahoga Falls, either the police department or fire department or both have them. And I believe the Akron Fire Department actually has one for, their crash accidents or, hazmat type calls. So we have collaborated already with other agencies because we don't have our own drone and we don't have our own program yet. The challenge with UAVs and drones is drones would serve so many different purposes. You may use one drone in one situation with the flare camera on it for, some heat seeking signature at night if you're looking for someone in a search and rescue or someone that is running from the police. And you may use a totally different UAV platform for a daytime fire that the fire department wants to figure out where the main part of the structure fire would be coming from. So the challenge with the collaboration is depending upon the need and the use that the drone would be called upon. It depends on what type of drone platform or camera that you might need. So those are some of the challenges with it, because there's dozens and dozens of drone manufacturers out there, and they all have kind of some type of different specialty with it. And, to buy one drone for multiple platforms sometimes can be tricky. And that's why a lot of departments may have 2, 3, or even 4, because it just depends on the need that they're trying to serve at that time. So these things can certainly add up and get expensive. But when you talk about drone versus a helicopter or an airplane, you're talking about a fraction of the cost. So this is up and coming. This is certainly has a use in law enforcement, and it's embraced, I think, by the citizens across the country under certain circumstances. And I think the community, if in fact, when we go live with this, the community should in fact know how we're using them, under what circumstances we're using them, and any other questions that they have, we should certainly be able to answer, much like before we implemented the body-worn camera program. We embraced the community. We tried to educate them. We went out to community meetings and told them that they were going to start being recorded. So, certainly a public awareness campaign would be something that would be helpful for, a piece of equipment like this, where people might not completely understand how it works and how the police are going to use it. So that would be essential to the program.
Thank you.
Good, Councilman. Thank you for that. Any other committee members? All right, with that, I think that brings us towards the end. Sarah, we don't have no new letters, correct?
We do not.
Okay. I know Lieutenant and I are working on something for our next meeting that will be held on October 21st. Lieutenant, if you want, go ahead and just explain what we're going to be discussing then.
Yeah. So, Councilman Neal, you asked about why we went with the new server platform and Volta, and if we, went out and considered like Microsoft Azure and all those things. So I think there might be some questions about how we network our city and safety forces IT and where that data is stored and stuff. So I was going to do maybe a 10-minute presentation on that with the help of one of the city networking guys, so he would be able to answer any questions you may have on that. Is that something you'd be interested in?
Oh, most definitely. And also, again, this is more of a holistic thing. Like if someone calls in a complaint, and usually the only person that could come out, if it's a barking dog, it goes to the police. It would be nice if that call comes to neighborhood assistance and to the council people, so that we can help on our end and find out, if it's a landlord issue, if it's a homeowner, so that we can assist. Because I can just speak from my own case. If it's a barking dog, and that's been a big issue in my ward in several areas, the people they call first are the police. And sometimes we don't find out about it until after 3 or 4 calls to the police. So technology-wise, if you guys get a call, if some kind of way it was connected to ours through the service department, to where we could all kind of like follow. In the business world, they call it project management workflow. so that it'll help us be able to collaborate more in addressing the issue. That was one of my concerns.
Okay. Good. Lieutenant, anything else?
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, Councilman Cameron, I don't know if you want to, make two shorter topics too, or you just want to stick to one, because I don't think that's really going to take a ton of time. I don't want to get in the weeds with IT where it's, above everyone's head. That's not helpful. I think you just want kind of a global picture as to why and how our servers and our network is where it is currently, and what some of the reasons and why we went in that direction. Is that what you're kind of wanting?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. I just want to kind of keep to an agenda that doesn't go too long, because I don't want to lose any viewers that are watching or that might watch it in the future. So yeah, we can discuss that. That's fine. And
Okay.
that's what this is about. So yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman, yeah.
Yeah, if I may, this is dealing with technology, but it is on a different level. I know with COVID, they have the opportunity to, if they realize that you had it, they could do this geo-mapping and tell who else was in the area because of their cell phone. And they have that kind of, it's an app that you can turn on or turn off. But I also know that we could use it by contacting cell phone companies where they can let us know if we have a number, who was in that area, what numbers were in that area. Do you know of communities, or has there been a discussion of a greater partnership with cell phone companies? So like if there is, in this case, in the worst case scenario, a shooting and there's a crowd, where we could do a mapping and tell what cell phone numbers were in that area at that time to be able to identify those people?
That's a great question, Councilman Neal. I don't know the answer. I could certainly look into that and get you an answer probably by next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I know what the police do as far as investigations. Once they come up with a suspect, then they start subpoenaing, cell phone records that way. And typically, when we search for witnesses, other names start coming up, and we definitely subpoena cell phone records, and we do mapping to put them at a certain place at a certain time to either recognize that they weren't involved or put them, on the scene of a crime. So that's done all the time. But I don't know, like, in more like a global general question, could you tell how many 50 people cell phones were in this certain area if a crime was committed? I don't know that answer. So I'd have to look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, before we adjourn, I just want to also recognize once again Shelby and Trayvon that are with us. Thanks for joining us. You too. I appreciate it. And also thank Councilman Shamus Malik for joining us earlier too. And he signed off. But yeah, I appreciate when other council members can join us too. So I appreciate that. Like I said, before we adjourn, our next meeting is Wednesday, October 21st, 5 p.m. And looks like we're moving forward. I appreciate it. Looks like good dialogue, and I like it so far. So with that, before I guess I can get a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I got a motion.
Second.
And second, all in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thank you.